He is ageless, and so am I. God brought us together for a reason. And nothing can keep us apart.
You know, I don't see a lot of women on To Catch a Predator. You don't see a lot of women on To Catch a Predator. In fact, I don't think I've seen one woman on To Catch a Predator.
I want to know a little bit more about you first. Can I eat first?
This sort of behavior doesn't seem to be big with the female race, okay? Until you look deeper. There's supposed to be a camera right there. Until you look a little deeper. Women seem to be a little bit more cunning and elusive when it comes to sexually offending. They just go straight to where the action happens. The public education system.
A 31-year-old woman who admits to having sex with a 13-year-old boy and then becoming pregnant with his child won't face any jail time under a plea deal with prosecutors.
I actually experienced this. Not to the full extent that we will be covering in this video, but I definitely had a high school teacher hit on me while I was still in high school. And of course, I didn't care because she was absolutely banging. Doesn't make any of this right. Absolutely should have talked to somebody about it. This story is absolutely wild and became national news in 1997 because of how forward and unapologetically this woman professed her undying love for this young... Did I say young? I meant this mature, loving, fully consenting 12-year-old man. Obviously, he's a grown man. Love has no bounds. Age, occupation, grade. Allow me to set the stage a bit. It's supposed to be another camera. Love can make people do crazy things, especially in this case, if you want to call it love. Seattle, June 18th, 1996. Police come upon a car parked in a marina parking lot facing the water, and it is very
late at night.
So it is far past recreational hours at the marina. The headlights of the squad car shine in on a single car and show through the foggy glass of the back window. A middle-aged woman climbing in the front seat from the back. But the officer quickly notices that there's two occupants in the car. And as he comes closer to the driver's side window, he sees the woman is still putting on her overshirt. He moves his flashlight through the front window, viewing into the back seat, where he sees a fairly young-looking male who seems to be pretending to sleep. As the officer begins to question the woman, she immediately lies about her identity and her age. So she's claiming to be far younger at this point. And the officer now signals to the boy to wake up. The officer asks the young boy, obviously young, to identify himself.
How old is he?
18.
You're how old? 13.
They weren't even worried about the officer identifying them. They were simply worried with being charged with a lewd act in public. Obviously, they're both nervous, but it's really showing in the young boy. The boy was getting all flustered and immediately is trying to deny that any sort of sexual behavior was happening. The woman tells the officer that the boy is a family friend, and after he witnessed that her and her husband had gotten into an argument, that he had stormed off and he wanted to go home, but he headed in a direction that normally he wouldn't walk. Fearing for him, got into her car and followed to where he was. She was trying to get him to come back to their house. The boy's mother was called by the police and they essentially told her about the boy's whereabouts. But they didn't inform her that her son had lied about his age and had lied about his identity. They simply just told her where her son was. So the boy was returned to the woman. That woman was Mary Kay Letourneau, a middle school teacher in the Highline School District of Seattle. And the 18-year-old boy was actually 12-year-old Vili Falau, a student in Mary Letourneau's 6th grade class. The way they depict him in this movie, he obviously doesn't look, he looks 25, but like, that's besides the point. And they were, if you didn't guess it, they were fucking in that car. Mary Catherine Letourneau was the daughter of a U.S. congressman and the 4th of 7 children, born and raised in a conservative Catholic existence. She grew up fairly normal with a little bit of trauma here and there, but we'll get to that later. As a college student, she began dating a fellow alum by the name of Stephen Letourneau, and shortly after getting pregnant, they were heavily encouraged by her father to get married. Originally, her dad didn't even want her to have the kid. He essentially wanted her to get an abortion. Mary Letourneau was someone that often helped out during the campaign for her father, because her father actually ran for president in 1972. This would obviously not look good on the entire family if they had gone through with the pregnancy, but they made sure that they got married. It came off as if they were already married before they're even having the children. When they moved to Alaska, they find out that their relationship really isn't going well. It wasn't gonna go well in the beginning, and Mary already knew this. Essentially, for the pageantry of the whole thing, for the outlook, the aesthetic of the family, Mary knew that she had to stick with Stephen. Even though things aren't going as planned, they have 3 more children. Stephen's in Seattle. Quickly becoming the new rising star rookie of the school district, she was praised by her peers and students. And as her love for work grew, every other aspect of her life had fallen apart. Her husband began to sleep with other women, and he even had a girlfriend while they were living together, and Mary would sleep on the couch. So Mary tried to find solace in her work. But instead, she found something else. Oh boy, did she find something else. One day, as she's teaching her class, the principal brings in a new student whose dad's in jail and mom works late nights at the bakery. A 7-year-old named Vili Falau. It becomes very well known to Miss Letourneau that Vili is a very talented artist, as he often draws her pictures that make her feel better. They always make her day. Another thing that happened during this time is that she had become sort of attached to Vili. Not in a weird way. It was more or less her wanting to help her student out. That's all this was. But picture it. Picture yourself in the class, the teacher comes up, slides you a little note, says, I wanna fuck. This didn't happen yet, okay? We're not that far on this. Miss Letourneau wanted to help Vili because everyone had given up on this kid. His mother was living a chaotic life. A full family in his house, no father. Her oldest son already had a child. Remember, his dad is in prison. So Miss Letourneau takes it upon herself to teach him music and trying to calm him, helping him with his drawing and helping him advance in his arts. That's the extent of the relationship. She understands he's a gifted child, but it makes her feel a certain way. It brings more enjoyment to her life. It takes her away from that life that she has at home. This little friendship, however, did turn strange when she started to flirt with him. Which to some may not seem crazy, okay? May still seem playful and lighthearted. I mean, he's a little kid. So what, the little kid has a crush on his teacher? Most people did, especially if your teacher was hot, alright? But she was feeling something else. Even this early on. It would have to come to an end because the school year ended. This wouldn't be the last time they saw each other. Let's fast forward 4 years. It is 6th grade, and Vili Falau now is wearing deodorant. He's smelling real nice, and he has a few bodies under his belt. Despite being 12, apparently this kid had already slept with a few girls. So this time, Vili is a little bit older, and now he's carried over this crush from the past. Vili has noticed that his teacher is giving him a little bit more attention, and then he's not the only one. Even other kids in the class see that Vili's getting a lot of attention. She can't stay away from that Latino heat. You know what I'm saying? She can't resist. They're doing tutoring sessions after school. Vili's staying over for yearbook and helping around and volunteering, getting close to Miss Letourneau. And Vili is suave, okay? Vili's got riz, he's got game. He's coming up to Miss Letourneau and he's telling her everything that she wants to hear, whispering sweet nothings. Okay, this is a child, but he comes on strong. He's the one that initiates a lot of these things, and her being the adult, she's supposed to push him away, which she does, but he is very persistent. Things got increasingly weird when she would begin to do things like kiss him on the cheek in the morning. Billy would offer to come to her house after school and work on things. His excuse was that he wanted to hang out with their older son, which was a grade or so behind Billy. We all knew what was really happening, right? The students were getting jealous. Like, why the fuck is Billy getting all the play? A lot of the kids started to feel very ugly. The summer of 96 hits, and they are spending all kinds of time together. She has taken this platonic and flirty relationship, and she made it sexual. Holy shit! Things get fucking physical. Things get rather physical. There were several occasions where they would leave school early. Both of them would leave school early. Or he would stay after school and he would take her back to his house. To explain this to his mother, he's basically saying that this teacher's just wanting to help him further his, his art career, whatever, just his interests. She's trying to further his interests. But Billy's brother ends up catching them making out in his room. And, I mean, he doesn't tell anybody because, like, hey, man, that's his brother. He's keeping it a secret, He's not going to tell on his brother. But that's a fucking teacher, man. Like, what are you doing? Apparently, Billy gets all the bitches. And he wasn't going to let this bitch get away. After her husband's hours change, they begin waiting till night, sneaking off into the car. So basically, she's raping this kid, all right? Like, at this point, it's just, even though he's the initiator in all of these instances, but in her eyes, it's a relationship between equals, right? She actually stated that he dominated her like no other man could or no other man would. She called him a leader. She called him masculine. He wanted it. She just fulfilled his needs. That shit's crazy, but let's continue. In her mind, she wasn't concerned with the illegality of the situation. She never even considered it illegal, right? The only thing that she was concerned about was if his mom would find out. Which, granted, that's pretty bad. Or his mom's obviously going to tell, right? But you didn't think not at one point? In her mind, she kept saying that he's different. He's not. It's all ageless. They're soulmates. Their souls are connected. Everything, the age has no bearing on what's happening. So around this time, Billy had begun to ask if Miss Letourneau would ever get a divorce, if she would ever leave her husband. He would stare into her eyes and say the most sexually provocative thing. He would get her favorite ice cream. He'd bring her favorite food. He'd bring her flowers. He'd make her pictures. He made symbols of their love, and he put them on paper, and she wrote stories about this whole thing.
It's my favorite kind. I know.
She actually kept everything in a journal. She kept every little detail that was going on in a journal on how she was going to explain to him that this love could not be. This illicit, this forbidden love just could not be. But she could never bring herself to actually say it to him. But all of it was in writing. In the instance of Billy making his first move with his first kiss, he originally thought that this was only going to last a few minutes, and it ended up lasting 30 minutes. A half hour makeout session out front of this spot that they had gone out for a date. And he said it would have gone on longer, except it was his curfew. His curfew is up because he's fucking 12. Even after this crazy night that we initially had discussed in the beginning of this entire story, This crazy night where Mary and Billy were caught in this car, they continued to see each other. It doesn't cause them to abstain one bit. Mary had become careless and would even bring Billy over when her current husband's relatives were over, so they would see what was going on. And what's absolutely insane is that his cousin understands the situation and sees just how connected they are and how strange their relationship is. And why no one noticed it before this is beyond me. Like, goddamn, like nobody noticed any of this shit going on. Maybe Mary's colleagues sort of noticed it happening, but Stephen's cousin's the one that ends up calling the police. Maybe it's the case that people were afraid to say something, right? Or maybe it's a case that people didn't want to admit to themselves that this was happening. They didn't want to even conceive, to believe that this was even in the realm of possibility. After Mary is arrested, she pleads guilty to 2 counts of child rape. And now she's going to be sentenced for 7 years in jail. It's over. That's it. The story should be done, but it's not. Of course it's not. I'm forgetting something. A minor detail. Oh yeah. During the time of her sentencing, Mary is out of prison. She's just waiting for this to happen. She gives birth to Billy's daughter. The entire time, she's pregnant. She is pregnant with his daughter. They had fucked like 5 or 6 times and made a baby. A 12-year-old kid and a 34, 35-year-old woman had made a miracle in life, you know? Miracles, right? Children. Like, what a crazy revelation, right? And while this is all happening, while she's awaiting her sentencing, Stephen, her husband, takes her original children, her first 4 kids, takes them all the way to move away with Mary's parents, actually, right? And she's devastated by this. She doesn't get to see her kids. She's not even allowed to see her kids alone. She has to have some sort of supervision. And now Stephen's taking the kids away. Per the judge's order, she's not even allowed to go around any children. So she's not allowed to go back to work. And she has to, what the sentence is end up being reduced to. It goes from 6-7 years all the way down to 6 months. And then, moreover, 3 months are suspended off of that. So she only ends up serving 3 months. But then she has to have 3 years or so of some sort of sex offender rehabilitation. But on top of that, she didn't even have to register as a sex offender. So all she has to do is serve her 3 months. Somehow the judge grants her the ability to see her newborn daughter. At this point, Billy's mom is devastated by this whole revelation, finding out that if she would have known what was happening, she never would have let him be around her son at all. And that Mary had broken trust between her family, and everybody involved. All for the sake of something that she was calling love. Custody is granted to Billy's mother, who already has a grandchild. She brings Billy and Mary's daughter to visit Mary in prison, just so that the baby can see her mother. Billy's mother still wants the baby to have some sort of relationship with Mary. Mary Kay Letourneau becomes a tabloid sensation. The tabloids, you know, that shit that's by the chocolate, like by the candy and gummy worms and stuff at Walmart. People were obviously upset about the sheer age gap between the 2 people. But this entire story was about to become even more controversial. Yeah. It gets worse. Mary had not only continued to tell her parents, tell her lawyers, the judge, the public, Billy's mother. She not only kept on telling everyone that she was in love with him, she was saying that there was nothing wrong with her. It was revealed to the public that Mary was the daughter of a congressman that had run for president. Mary had lived in the shadow of her father. And like I said before, she had followed in the campaign, and she felt that she herself was someone who was going to go into Congress. This whole life that she had painted before was basically something that she thought she had to do because of her father. So everything that has built up to this is sort of a rejection of her entire life prior. There was something that had happened in Mary's childhood that had left a stain. Mary grew up in a very well-off family. right? Since her father was well endowed and was involved in politics, they had a pretty nice upper middle class house. I would say it's even more of a wealthier class house. And they had a swimming pool in their backyard. And as all the kids were playing in the pool, Mary was the oldest at the time. And she was tasked with watching her little brother, who was around 3. And at some point during all of this, where the kids were playing, Mary was not paying attention to her little brother. There was a point where her brother had stumbled into the pool and no one had noticed him. And somehow he had sank to the bottom. Now, I'm not really sure if that's true at all, but the mother, so Mary's mother, had found the child at the bottom of the pool, who was unresponsive, and they were unable to resuscitate him. And her father blamed Mary for this. Even though the truth is that you shouldn't leave children to watch children. You know, that's just not how that should go. But this was something that weighed heavily on Mary. And this could have something to do with all the things that had happened leading up in her life and this rejection of her father. Mary cannot resist the charm. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing right here, but like, you know what I mean? Villy was just fuego. She could not resist. Although, as soon as she's out, she's reminded very adamantly that you were supposed to have no contact with this kid whatsoever. Even though she got to see your child, that doesn't mean that she's going to be able to just go back with this kid. But guess what? She can't resist the charm. She can't resist the warm embrace that is Villy Falau. And she's found with him in a car 2 weeks later. 2 weeks after her release, and she's getting pounded again. God damn it, Mary. Who is this kid? He needs to teach me his way. I swear, it's a Hispanic thing. I'm half Mexicano, and I understand older women having a thing for me. Even when I was fairly young, I sort of understood it. Now that I'm a little older, I realize just how fucking creepy these bitches were. She wasn't even trying to hide it. The car was found by her home. They had actually seen each other on numerous occasions prior to this. They had gone out and wore disguises, wearing hats and glasses to shield their identity. Villy admitted to a little bit of smoochy happening and a little bit of thigh grabbing. He says there's no sex. They lied to the detective about their identities. Once again, after a little bit of searching, the police found $6,000 in cash, along with baby clothes and men's clothing. Now, Mary at the time had said that this was something that she was wearing. She likes to wear bigger clothes or whatever, how the shirts fit. But it's obvious what was going on. They were trying to be a family. And also what was found was a passport. They were going to go. They were going to leave. This was going to be it. She was going to be away with this kid to go to a country where it's probably legal. In February of 1998, the judge had revoked Letourneau's prior plea agreement and had reinstated the prison sentence of 7.5 years for violating this no contact order. In interviews and in a book on her involvement with Falau, she had had sex with Falau in January, and this was actually proven because while she's in prison, she has another baby. Somebody summon DJ Khaled because there is another one. Police said they had seen no evidence that sex had occurred. October 16th, 1998, Letourneau and Falau had co-authored a book which was published in France called Only One Crime. The crime was love. In 1999, a second book appeared, published in the United States, but written with only minimal cooperation from her and none from Falau. The book was titled If Loving You Was Wrong. During her imprisonment, Letourneau was allowed visits from her children, but was denied permission to attend her father's funeral. And while in prison, Letourneau tutored fellow inmates, created audiobooks for blind readers, participated in prison choir, and rarely missed mass. But because of her notoriety, She was very unpopular with other inmates. To make the situation even worse, something that makes everything worse is solitary confinement. The most competent individual that you know personally can drive them to insanity. Being alone with your own thoughts, especially if you've had no time to do the work to understand your thoughts, to meditate, it makes everything worse. 18 out of the first 24 months she spent in solitary confinement. While she's in prison, Billy's still out here gaming. Alright? He's actually dating girls his age. But as soon as Mary gets out, he actually keeps his promise. Was it love? Is it really love? He actually keeps his promise. And he marries Mary Catherine Letourneau. Billy, now 21, had persuaded the court to remove the no contact order. Moreover, what's even crazier is that the attorney had actually begun to believe over all this time that they were in love. If he waited all this time and he dropped all the girls to go back to his one true love, how could it not be love? And they lived this out. They stayed together all the way up until 2019. Where Billy actually filed for divorce. After hearing from so many people, he finally understood what had happened to him. That this was fucked up. That this was not real love. It couldn't be. It was perversion. Billy early on tried so many times to tell people that he was not a victim in this case. But that's the worst part about being the victim in something. Is that a lot of times people don't know that they are. They don't understand. Whether it be someone trapped in a relationship, an abusive one, or something like this. Someone with something akin to Stockholm Syndrome. Falling in love with their attacker, their kidnapper. The boy had had a bad life, so anybody looking out for him seemed like a good idea. And also when you're young like that, and he was experiencing all these relationships with girls, and he had already had sex at such a young age, it seemed only right at the time, if he was attracted to somebody, why not be his teacher? If he's attracted to her, and he has that feeling inside of him, and she's willing to reciprocate, why should he not pursue it? And it's quite obvious, because it's perversion, because there's vulnerability involved, there is some sort of power struggle, even though in Mary's eyes, she was adolescent in the mind. She thought of it, she's living out a fantasy. She's helping him live out his fantasy. A match made in heaven for them, but a match made in hell in the eyes of everyone else. But still, these two were drawn together by something. After raising their two daughters, who completely understood the situation, but had to live out their life because that's their parents. It turns out that shortly after the separation, in 2020, Mary Catherine Letourneau actually got colon cancer. And it wasn't looking good. And while she's laying on her deathbed, there's only one person that showed up to be by her side. And that was Billy Falau. Even though they had been separated, even though he had just divorced her and had seemingly moved on, he was the one that held her hand once again as she passed away. If you made it all the way to the end, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. Let me know of any other stories that are insane that you would like me to cover in detail. This one was completely insane. I didn't even know there was a movie for it, but there was a movie for it.
If one of your daughters came to you and said, "I'm sleeping with my teacher," what would you say?
What?
What? Yeah, okay.
It would be. I think it would be the same reaction that any parent would have. You know, if their child came up and said, "You know, I'm in love with my teacher."
What about if they said they were sleeping with anyone?
I don't know really how to deal with it.
I don't know if enough time will ever pass where it will take away what the media did to our story, because it was so big and they ran with it so fast. There is a story of us that has a life of its own, but it's not our story.